Hello, everybody. My name is Maurice Button. I'm the CEO of City Financial Global, and it's my pleasure to welcome you to the next in our series of speaker interviews. It's great to have with us today Giles Pratt. He's a partner at Freshfields, Brookhouse Derringer. And Giles is going to be speaking at our AI Regulation Summit, which is being held in London on the 5th of October. Giles, welcome.
Thanks, Maurice. Great to be here.
Great to have you with us. Now, let's turn to the first question. How can businesses create IP value for themselves in the AI supply chain?
So there's obviously a lot of talk about AI regulation at the moment, but actually probably the thing that people are most focused on from a business perspective is how they're going to drive some real value for themselves in what is a very, very rapidly changing landscape. That means that people are really focusing on what is special about their implementation of AI. What are they using to train models? Are they creating valuable IP in their prompt engineering? What does it mean to say that you might own or be exclusive insofar as your rights might exist in fine-tuned models? And again, thinking about the outputs from your AI, there's a lot of discussion about whether outputs from generative AI are reliable, but do you own them? Are they things that are going to be yours? Might they infringe other people's rights? And so thinking through that value chain from the inputs to the model to the outputs is really just part of how kind of lawyers, other advisors can help people stay close to the engineers, really, in terms of what really matters to them.
Yeah, there's considerable debate about the IP side and the protection of IP, isn't there? We'll come back to that perhaps in a moment. But what types of regulatory approach are we seeing or might we see in regard to AI across the world?
There are a lot of different ways to slice this. I think there's two types of approach and then lots of things within those. The first factor to think about is the regulation going to be about a specific type of AI, a specific use case, or is it going to be a general regulation about AI? And then the other piece in play is it really regulation, or is it going to be guidance, or is it going to be hard-coded law? You've got those two different variables in play as you look at the way in which this is evolving. I think if you look across the world, you actually see examples of all of that. You will see examples of soft guidance, often kind of brought out by particular regulators. You see principles-based approaches which apply on often kind of cross-regulatory bases. We can talk about that. You see traditional legislation. And then you are also seeing examples of some countries picking on particular use cases that they think merit a greater degree of regulatory intervention, and then others where people are trying to grasp the general problem of AI and often finding that quite hard to regulate.
Yes, it must be very hard to get your arms around the whole thing, so to speak, from a legal or regulatory point of view. The EU's made a pretty good stab at it with the AI regulation. Do you think that's likely to become a template for other jurisdictions across the world?
The EU has done very good business in being an exporter of regulation in general, and I think this will be a good example of that. They have taken a bit of a hybrid approach. So yes, it's legislation, but it's aiming at both particular use cases based on a spectrum of perceived harms, and it's also aiming at some types of AI which you would say are more kind of generic for regulation because it's looking at foundation rules. People will know that at the moment there is quite a hot debate as to the way in which all of that works, but it's certainly perceived as a worthy model for other countries to look at. Some countries are actually further ahead in terms of having legislation. People will be aware that there is new Chinese regulation on AI, for example, and so there are going to be quite a few benchmarks for people to consider.
Okay. Going back to your earlier point about IP and IP law, obviously AI regulation overlaps with a number of different areas of regulation. How do you see that sort of interplay between AI regulations, specific AI regulation, and IP, I don't know, consumer protection, employment law, and so on?
So I think if you're a business, you're asking yourself, can I do it? Can I use it? and that's both an IP question, insofar as you might be saying, if my models are going to produce particular outputs for me, I need to have the right level of comfort that those are not going to be infringing, and that is something which I can then take to market. And then you've got an overlay from a regulatory perspective. Is the output from my model something which I am allowed to use because it fits with norms from a privacy, competition law perspective? All the usual range of regulation, and that cross-regulatory approach that you're referring to is very evident in some regimes, particularly I should say in the UK, where I mentioned earlier the opportunity for a principles-based approach. Here we have a digital regulation cooperation forum. You've got the FCA, the CMA, the ICO, Ofcom, pulling in principle in the same direction in terms of the high-level principles that should matter in the implementation of AI. So businesses are really looking at both the IP question and the regulatory question in parallel. Frankly, all of them with a strong impetus to get to market quickly. I think people want to understand the red lines here. They want to know the guardrails, but very few people want to be saying no. People want to find how to do it.
Yeah, yeah. And final question, because we run out of time, Giles, but in terms of, there's much discussion about the need for a global AI regulator. I mean, do you think that's feasible or even desirable? What's your view on that?
Look, I think it's hugely challenging to achieve that, and we'll have some debate about that at the conference, no doubt.
Yeah.
My sense is that we are not yet at a stage where everyone has the same approach to the different rules. There will be different national interests at play, given the way in which national champions will be relevant to the debate. But I think you will be able to find common principles across many different jurisdictions. People are very focused, almost ubiquitously, on transparency, explainability, fairness, security, safety, perhaps to different degrees, and that may make it hard to have one regulator to rule them all. But I think we will hopefully find a communality of topics to focus on, even if we don't always have the same answer to those questions.
Very good. Okay. Well, Giles, thank you very much for that. We're looking forward to hearing what you will be saying on the panel that you're moderating at the event, the AI Regulation Summit in London on the 5th of October. We very much hope that our viewers will be able to join us in person at that event. So, Giles, thanks so much for sharing your thoughts.
Pleasure.